Before we start this episode, please be aware that we'll be discussing sexual violence, which could upset or trigger some people. I've provided links for support in the show notes.
I grew up in a very abusive household. My father was quite respected as a Christian, but he was also a very abusive man. I found love and real kinship in Christianity and in the church, and then I ended up being sexually assaulted by my Sunday school teacher. First of all, I'd say that the shame isn't yours to carry. All of that shame, all the blame belongs to the perpetrator, the person that has hurt and wounded you.
Hello, remarkable woman. I'm your host, Dr. Connie Kerali, medical doctor and survivor of sexual violence, and you're listening to Speak Shame, a collection of inspiring conversations with remarkable women who have faced and overcome adversity. By sharing their stories, my hope is that you may find strength, connection, and hope in your own journey, and that shame itself loses its power. Don't forget to follow the show. Joining me on this week's episode of Speak Shame is the remarkable Chioma Alade. Chioma is a UK clergy, cult and sexual abuse specialist who, with kindness and a lot of fire, lives to prove that a beautiful life is possible after healing from trauma. Chioma is a British Nigerian who lives in the UK with her husband, who is her best friend. She grew up in a home with domestic violence and was physically and sexually abused as a child. Upon finding what she thought was a father figure as a child in a church, she was then physically and sexually abused for a further period of over a decade. Chioma was born with a genetic health condition and invisible disability, Ehlers Danlos syndrome. She struggled with her education and with perseverance completed her GCSE, A-levels and a degree. She went on to achieve a childhood dream of being surrounded by natural beauty and selling diamonds, working at the world's premier jeweller, Tiffany & Co, for over 10 years. Chioma has served for over 2 decades in church environments and has seen the strength of the church and weakness in areas such as safeguarding, accountability, and compassion. She is currently serving on a pastoral team. She delivers education on abuse awareness, disability advocacy, and building safe and compassionate churches. So thank you so much, Chioma, for being with me today.
It's my honor to be here. I'm so excited to be here. I can't wait for us to discuss.
I'm going to kick things off with a question that I ask all my guests so we can get to know you a bit better. And that question is, if your life story was turned into a book, what would happen in chapter 1?
I mean, let's not start on depression. I would say that it would start off with potential. It starts off with, I would say, a pretty a hopeful kid with a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it would start off with.
I love that. Potential is absolutely right. And that's what we're all born with as well. And so I'm going to dive into your story now. And I know that in that introduction, I gave people a slight flavour of what your life's journey has been. But if you could talk us through and take as much time as you want to, talk us through the journey of your life from a young age to essentially the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my name's Chioma, as she said. Thank you so much for having me. I would describe my childhood as a bit of a tale of opposites, because I've always been someone who lived in my own world and I've always had a vivid imagination. And so I always imagined worlds that was different from what I experienced. And I grew up in a very abusive household. My father actually was quite respected as a Christian. And obviously later on became an evangelist and things like that. But he was also a very abusive man. And so he abused my mother and he abused me very much. And he was just abusive just generally towards the whole family. And I think there's that old saying that psychologists say that the relationship between parents becomes the childhood of children, and you can't separate the relationship with parents from the story of a child. And I definitely experienced a lot of turmoil because of that. And I found love and real kinship in Christianity and in the church. And so from that background, I found a place of safety that I thought was in the church. And then I ended up being sexually assaulted by my Sunday school teacher, who went on to abuse me for a very long period of time. And to the outside world, he was my hero. He was my dad. And I think because of other vulnerabilities that I now know as autism, I was able to, in my mind, separate the harm that he caused from the way that I thought that he loved me. And it went on for a very, very long time because of the challenges of a dysfunctional family. Obviously, neurological vulnerabilities, and then the other challenges that I had in my life as well, alongside being undiagnosed with Ehlers Danlos syndrome, which I had had from birth and was not diagnosed until I was 32, I believe, about 32, 31. So that was kind of my beginning story. And now I'm on the other side of healing and recovery. And I've just qualified as a practice lead in sexual abuse. So that's very exciting.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing your story. And I just really appreciate the work that you do. I was saying this before, how amazing your work is, and for helping so many of the people who maybe have gone through something similar. When do you recall realizing, actually, no, this isn't right, or this shouldn't be happening to me?
I remember feeling discomfort and feeling frustration and anger. But if I'm being very honest, I didn't really compute it as abuse until I understood that it was happening on a wider scale. And that I was, because like every single victim, I don't think if people understood that they were being abused, they would leave immediately.
Yeah.
But there's the grooming process. And then there's the lowering of your self-esteem. And then there's making you feel like you are less than them so that they can be above you. And then there's the establishing of the power dynamic and the fact that you are nothing without them. And all of that emotional and kind of enmeshment and control, I would say, and what we call obviously coercive control, didn't have me realizing that it was abuse until the age of 30. I didn't, I literally did not understand. Um, and while there were many moments where I was like, okay, this makes me uncomfortable. This hurts. I don't like this. I didn't really wake up until 30 years old. And I kind of woke up with a fury.
What was that like for you when that happened?
I woke up with a fury because I was infuriated. My visa was still in my life, still in a very powerful position. And at that point, I now acknowledge, which I did realize at the time, that he had basically created a cult, which in my mind was a church. And so I was a part of, alongside a fantastic team of church leaders that had to help dismantle that when we realized that his behavior was widespread. Obviously, they had no idea what was happening with me. Nobody knew. And I think there's something about realizing that he might be trying to do something to someone that you love and that you care about that makes you wait, like, I don't understand. It's that. And like many survivors, I woke up because I realized that he was trying to do what he had done to me to someone else.
I wonder if you could talk us through that part of the journey from waking up, having that fury, getting that help as well with others to dismantle what was going on, and then training in the work that you're doing at the moment.
Sure. I think the first process was radical acceptance of what
Mm.
happened. And radical acceptance is extremely painful. It's very painful because you have to admit that you were vulnerable. And that's the part of sexual abuse that hurts because you realize that you weren't as in control of what happened and what was happening to you. You realize that someone abused you, that someone did things against your consent. And as an adult, that can be a really painful thing to
Yeah.
even try to fathom. for children that go through this having been a child that went through this, it's horrifying. And it's that realization that you were being abused and you didn't know. And all the times that you tried to gaslight yourself or talk yourself out of how bad it was or how uncomfortable it made you, and all the things that your abuser said that made you feel like there wasn't even an ounce of caring about you, it all kind of vanishes away so quickly. And that rug kind of gets pulled from underneath you. And in the lives of people who are abused for long periods of time, it can be a very mentally destabilizing time.
Yeah.
Because you feel like your whole world is falling apart.
What work did you have to do to get to radical acceptance, to build your self-esteem again?
That's, I think I really focus on nervous system regulation,
Mhm.
because I remember going to see some breathing specialists, and they kind of put me in a very big, expensive, fancy machine and monitored my breathing. And they were like, we've been testing you while we've been talking to you. And when I was in the machine and everything, they were like, you are actively hyperventilating, even when you are completely at rest. And they were like, a lot of your problems are, it's, it's all of that. And I also had to have some surgeries because of the abuse that I faced, as a child and as an adult, both physically and sexually. And there's nothing like being in a hospital bed because of the abuse to make you realize that, okay, it wasn't all in your head.
Yes.
And so I had to go on that journey. And I love talking about the medical side because no one ever talks about the medical side. Like, people talk about the emotions and finances and everything, but no one talks about the medical consequences of abuse. They can be so, 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 so severe. And from taking care of my body and getting my body what it needed and seeing the right professionals, which took some time, but I'm really happy I was able to access to, um, really activating mental health therapies. I was very unfortunate at the time that it all came out. It came out in the middle of COVID. So there wasn't things were not open, you know? And I've also been really fortunate to have a lot of fantastic people around me. When it all kind of blew up, it wasn't a process that I went on alone. And, any psychologist will tell you that speaking to and being in contact with people that have had the same experiences as you is a massive aid to recovery. And so I'm so glad that I lived and walked through with people who had had that same experience. I think it changed the game for me, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, and actually that really links me into one of my questions, which is, how has your experience connected you with others who've gone through something similar?
Yes, I mean, I speak to survivors every week. Um, I put out a social media post in 2021 on my birthday. It's about that I was abused, and from that moment, it has not stopped.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things that I really wanted to do, but I really wanted training first, because while I believe that experience has lessons, I don't always think it's a qualified teacher. And so I really wanted to train, and I've just finished. And if, on all honesty, I have a whole other page of things I want to study still, because it's just so complex. And the
Yeah.
more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. Um, I've spoken to so many survivors, hundreds if not thousands at this point, and they've all been so gracious to share their stories with me. And I've read so many more too. Yeah, it's really changed the game, being honest and open about it, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. I can completely imagine. And how do you feel like your experience has shaped who you are today?
That's such a good question. I hope that it's made me more compassionate. I know it's definitely made me a lot more discerning, for sure. I think it's kind of put a fire in my belly to help people get safe. And that's why I started by 14, because my dream is to help everyone be able to identify predators. I joke with my friends that I really want the aunties and uncles to send the WhatsApp, videos. And I'm Nigerian, and the Nigerian community, they be sending a lot of interesting videos. And my dream is to have every single person be able to identify a predator. And so I desperately want that. And I also want to provide support for more survivors, especially that complex intersectionality between um, global majority slash minority communities and faith and religion of whatever kind. It's just such a unspoken and underfunded and overlooked intersection that where there is so much abuse that doesn't get spoken about because of systemic challenges, but also because of the culture of shame.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really important point that you mentioned there about the culture of shame. And I wonder actually if you could talk about maybe your own experience of shame during the time that you went through what you went through.
Thank you. The culture of shame played such a massive part in what I went through, in the fact that it happened to me, and also because of how my predator assumed it would affect me.
Mhm.
Because I grew up in the church and I'm a Christian, I minister myself. But I am aware that there is a absolute glorification of virginity. And um, in many, many areas of the church, anything sexual is like complete taboo. And so predators of the church capitalize off the fact that if they do anything sexual, their victims will not speak up because they do not want to be seen as impure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they, for many victims, the societal consequences of speaking up about something like that are too heavy to bear, and therefore they don't speak up. Or because of problematic theology that has its roots in the patriarchy and has its roots in the subjugation of women, they can also count on, when it comes to female victims, they're victims of all genders, by the way, but um, they can be sure that the women will continue to blame themselves for what's happening to them, you know? And my predator counted on the culture of shame to keep me silent. And he was right
Yeah.
till he wasn't.
Yeah. Until he wasn't,
Yes.
absolutely. But you made so many important points there about the culture of shame. And I wonder, what would you say to someone who maybe feels stuck in a similar situation that they can't say anything because of this culture of shame?
First of all, I'd say that the shame isn't yours to carry. What has been said about you, uh, what has been done to you is not your fault. At any point in time that you went to speak up, and I hope it's today, you can, and know that no matter what someone says to you or the way someone feels about what has happened to you, all of that shame, all the blame belongs to the perpetrator, the person that has hurt and wounded you, doesn't belong to you. And it's in your best interest to speak up. And I know that it's so challenging to do. And you're not responsible for any any of the challenges that come up with that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I know from my own personal experience of speaking to someone the first time, telling them about my own rape and being able to feel almost like a weight was lifted off my shoulders
Yeah.
when I did that. And so thank you for sharing that advice. And I mentioned briefly in the introduction about your health, and you talked about
Mm,
this invisible disability and being
yes.
diagnosed at 32 with Ehlers
Yes.
Danlos.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could maybe talk about what your experience was like having a health condition that nobody knew what was going on.
Definitely. Definitely. So I was diagnosed in 2022. So I've been 31, 32. I was sick my whole life.
Mm.
Um, it's a genetic condition, and there are lots of, there's about 13 or 14 types of Ehlers Danlos syndrome. And mine is the only type that they are aware of some of the genetic markers for it. There's not a particular one. There's just a couple of different markers, and it basically affects my whole body. So the genetic structure of the strength of my connective tissue is essentially genetically compromised. And we know basically it's too bendy, it's too soft. It's not. It doesn't grow stronger. So even when things grow, they're still not as strong as they should be. Obviously, that affects every single part of my body. It affects all of my connective tissue, head down, affects everything. And unfortunately, my diagnosis came pretty late. I'm really happy that I got it though. And that was a lot of fighting and a lot of advocacy to get there.
I'm glad you got that diagnosis, and I'm also grateful that you're doing a lot of advocacy work. And you mentioned the organization that you set up. Was that you say it was B14?
By 14,
By
yes. So
14.
yeah, by 14 is about sexual abuse. And I do in wherever I can always try and talk up about the effect of disability, especially invisible disabilities, because when people have a disability that they can see, either if they use assistance or um, if they are in a wheelchair, or they have perhaps a guide dog, they still don't get the help that they need or the assistance. They still don't get what they need. But I think there's hopefully in most cases a kind of understanding when you have a disability that's not seen, it kind of either feels like you're faking it or you're exaggerating it. Um, it's just not as easily understood. And so, wherever possible, I do try to, and also to remind other people that have invisible disabilities that they're not alone.
I can't say this enough. I love the work that you're doing. And I think that people who have been listening to this today will probably be like, actually, I would love to find out more about Chioma and the work that she's doing. Where can people find you?
They can find me online at Chioma Alade, Chioma Alade. Uh, and they can find me on Threads, on Instagram. Also, please follow by 14. It is my dream to get into every church, every religious organization that will open their doors to me and to educate every child about predator awareness before the age of 14 in the UK. So please, 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 follow by 14 and spread the word. We're going to have a lot of interesting education coming out for educators, for parents, and for kids coming soon this year. So keep an eye out, and our website will be launching very soon.
Amazing. I'm going to put
Thank
all of that in the show notes. People will be coming to find you for sure. What do you hope listeners will take away from hearing your story?
I hate people realize that healing is possible, but healing is hard and painful. And I never want to shy away from that. I think we kind of put this um, pressure on survivors to like, oh, are you not healed yet? Like, is it not fixed yet? And abuse is life altering. And I do personally believe that recovery is possible and it takes time and it takes a lot of support. Unfortunately, support that I don't think the system is fully capable or prepared for. And there are some fantastic charities. I have to give a massive shout out to Hassana, for example. Rape Crisis, Secrets Worth Sharing, surviving surviving universal, all like amazing charities that help people that have experienced the things that I have been through, and help them kind of get better and find their footing once again. But healing is possible, but it does take time, and it's okay to also to cut off people who are not helpful to your healing journey. I can't say that again. I can't say that more. Like, I took far too long to do that, and I wish I had done that earlier. Someone who cannot support you in your victimhood is definitely not going to champion you as a survivor. So pick the people wisely and let the right ones love on you.
Wise words there. Honestly, I love all of that. And I think that as well, I'll make sure that the links to those charities that you mentioned are in the show notes as well, because absolutely it's not easy work, but it is worth doing. And so thank you for sharing that. I wonder if there's anything that you were like, actually, I really want to talk about this before we kind of come to the end. Do let me know if there's something you want to say.
Oh, thank you. I would say that anyone is listening from the NHS. We need better support and easier pathways for people who have been abused, who speak up later and have medical repercussions from their abuse. Because you go to the police and they do their thing, hopefully, and they hopefully do it on time. And then you have all these other medical issues, and because it's not an immediate case, it's not seen as an medical emergency. So you don't classify under that. You don't get the police escort that takes you to for doctors or speak to specialists, or you don't get the expedited care. You don't get any of that. And so when you speak up later in life, and the stats are 17 years, I believe, or so, or it's definitely more than a decade from people talking about abuse to and the age range of when it actually first occurred. So people aren't getting the care that they need when they speak up later in life. And when you look at some of the medical consequences for untreated injuries from abuse, they can be very severe. And so we need better pathways to make that easier, especially when a lot of the surgeries and medical interventions that can happen can dramatically improve someone's quality of life.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And anyone listening in the NHS, and we can talk about this afterwards as well, because I think that is such an important thing. And myself as a GP, hearing your story, it does make me think, gee, yeah, what do we offer? How do we make it accessible for people who have gone through abuse and ensure that they're getting everything that they need? So thank you for mentioning that. And I want to end really by asking a question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, if you had to name one remarkable woman who has inspired you, who would it be and why?
Oh dear. How could I choose one?
You can make it more than one, it's okay.
Um, Corrie ten Boom. She was the first female watchmaker in a country in Europe. But she and her family hid survivors of the Holocaust. Before they were all captured, she was the only living survivor of her family. Everybody else was killed in the camps. Um, she just reminds me that the work that has been placed into your hands that you do well can be used to save people. And from a shop that they would do repairs in for jewelry and watches, they were able to save so many lives, which is amazing. And I'd also have to say Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I used her work in my A-levels. I used her work in my dissertation. I'm going to meet her someday.
Yeah.
I don't know how. But I'm going to meet her someday. Her work, especially my tribe is Igbo, she's also Igbo. We have severe challenges with, and also many great things, but the subjugation of women in our culture. And so the work that she has done has been pretty life-changing, and it has, as a child, her work has followed me. So yeah, those two women.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, to both of those women. And I really honestly appreciate you talking with me today, for talking about those remarkable women there at the end, and the work that you are doing, which I think is remarkable as well. So thank you so much, Chioma, for being with me today.
Thank you for asking me.
Thank you for listening to Speak Shame with me, Dr. Connie Kerali, and thank you so much to Chioma Alade for sharing your story with us today. Please take a look at the show notes for information on Chioma's social media handles so that you can connect with her. If you'd like to join the community, head over to @Dr. Connie Kerali on Instagram. And if you're a remarkable woman who knows that your story matters but don't know how to tell it yet, then join my free private community, the Storytellers Club, to discover the power hidden in your story. You'll find the sign-up link in the show notes. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to get a new episode every other Thursday. Until next time, take care.